Good evening, one and all. Welcome to the Bitchuation Room podcast. Also a live stream, also a YouTube channel at Franny Fio, a Twitch stream at Franny Fio. So good to have you here. We have, of course, I feel like lately the show is like 2 hours and change. We got another one of those shows for you today. We got a doozy of a show. We're packing it in. Professor Richard Wolff, Professor Emeritus at UMass Amherst, is joining me to talk about inflation, rising interest rates, how the feds want to kill the working class in order to offer our bodies up to the business class and be like, here, I've delivered, like a cat bringing a toy around. And except it's us. Anyway, that's going to be so good. As well as, of course, the Dragon Daddy of the Damage Report, which I am on every single Monday. John Iadarola is here. We're going to be talking about Biden's response to the Roe v. Wade overturn. Is it finally sufficient? Is it more than just voting harder? We're looking at the executive order that was issued this week, as well as Boris Johnson, Prime Minister in the UK, just resigned out of shame. We didn't know that could still happen in the year 2022, so I want to get into that. And then we have bonus content, of course. Every single week we got bonus content, and this is gonna be. I feel like, I want to put this on main, but I'm like not because it's so good. And I have to thank all the people who are patrons at patreon.com/bitchuationroom. We're gonna be talking about Elon Musk and him finally keeping with the pet metaphors, just letting go, like dropping the ball. Drop it, drop it, drop it, drop it. You're not going to swallow that. Finally dropping the Twitter ball and backing out of his $44 billion deal to buy that platform. And Twitter's not so happy about it. So I want to get into what that means. Can he back out of it? Why are we rooting for no one in between? So, of course, again, for all of your bonus content needs, patreon.com/bitchuationroom. You support this show, literally making this happen. Every single goddamn week, the difference between life and death, that's you. Also, if you don't know, we have merch. Yes, bitchuationroom.com. We've got t-shirts, we've got tote bags, we've got stickers. I haven't plugged this in a while, but I did just see former producer Becca with a Frantifa shirt on. It's so cute. It looks so good on her. So shout out to Becca and for modeling my Frantifa shirts. And last announcement, except no, there's like 3 more. The Bitchuation Room is moving from Sunday nights because, I want to be human. Sorry. I'd like to stay out late and party on Saturdays. No, that's not why. It's so I can sort of be a lazy Sunday bum. That's what I want. That's what I want. A Sunday, a quiet Sunday. But that doesn't mean the Bitchuation Room is not going to continue. We're moving to Tuesdays. That's right. Tuesdays. Franny on a Tuesdays. 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central. Mark your calendars. That's starting in August. So I believe August 9th is our very first show on a Tuesday. You'll be able to get, obviously, the podcast right to your ear holes Tuesday night. So don't worry about that. You're going to still have all that if you prefer the show as a podcast. And if you do, why not give the show 5 stars on iTunes right now? Write me something sweet. Write a review. Tell me how I saved your life. Last night, Francesca saved my life. Last night, Francesca saved my life from a broken heart. Okay. Right? Okay. I'm done. Also, if you don't mess with the Patreon, that's cool. You can tip the show, TBR-Live on Venmo, TBR Live on Cash App. I will take your money, honey, is what I'm trying to say. All right. Why don't we get into this? I have something very briefly to bitch about. It's so quick, but everybody get your bitch caps on. This is What Are You Bitching About? I forgot to mention, this is important. Next week, next Sunday, July 17th is, I knew there were more announcements. Abortion Access Front is doing a training, and I'm going to be on virtually. Like, I'm not going to be on the training, but I'm going to be there. Okay. You know what I'm saying? I'm be on the other side of the screen. And so everybody register, guys. This is at Abortion AF. Here, let me put this. aafront.org, July 17th. It goes from 11 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern. So join for some of it, join for all of it. Figure out how to plug in to reproductive rights work in your area, to abortion access work in your area. Don't feel alone, and or that your only recourse is to take the streets, as wonderful and awesome as that is. There's more we can all do. I'm planning on joining. We'll do the show obviously later that day, but just so you know, I want to see y'all there. I want everyone to join. We've had Liz Winstead on. We talked about this for a while, so make sure to do that. That's not what I'm bitching about. I'm actually going to flip the script. Other than the ants that are in my house, that are everywhere, and I never know where they're coming from. And yeah, I sprayed the vinegar, and it just sort of like, it discombobulates them, for a little bit. But then the raid just kind of like, they're just like frozen. It's like a fucking like Pompeii, right? When you do raid on ants. So like, and so other than that, which sucks, they always want the cat food. I'm not going to bitch about anything because I think we need some hope. And I wanted to shout out some of the electoral wins and or soon-to-be wins here in Los Angeles. The country is rapidly moving to the right, and centrists are super scared at what's happening in LA because Mitch O'Farrell and Gil Cedillo are pretty much going down. Mitch, there's a runoff there, but you're talking about two city council members who have been very much sort of centrist, go along Democrats who love to, I don't know, evict the unhoused. And we had Hugo Soto Martinez on this show. We also had Eunices Hernandez on this show. Both of them. Eunices has won against Gil Cedillo. Hugo is going to a runoff, I believe, and it looks very good. You also have progressive city comptroller Kenneth Mejia winning his race. And then you have Karen Bass, who I don't agree with the way that she's embracing the cops, but I sure as shit am happy that she can be a little bit of a front against someone like Rick Caruso, who jumped out in front on like day of voting. But then when all the mail-in ballots came down, of course, after all the think pieces and all the fucking analyses were around, went around the country, like, what does this mean? Blah, 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 blah. Like, oh shit, Karen Bass is up by like quite a lot. So yeah, is she going to be like amazing? Probably not. Probably not. Is it better than a billionaire who wants to put like a Wetzel's Pretzels instead of a homeless shelter? Yeah. Let's build a Wetzel's instead of housing. Hell yeah. Not a solution, Caruso. Not a fucking solution. Anyway, so that is what I'm excited about. You got to focus on the local, the small wins. That's really important. And I'm so glad that we had Hugo and we had Eunices on, and I hope to have them on again to talk about what they're doing on city council when they get there. And with that, I'm going to bring in for the hour and change my co-host, my guest. He's not a co-host. Let's calm down. He is the host of the award-winning Damage Report on the TYT network every single goddamn day. He's a Dragon Daddy. He's wonderful. He's a homie. Please welcome John Iadarola.
Francesca, and thank you for having me on my show. But you did say co-host. You said it. So now I'm the co-host. We're sharing this thing. You came this close to giving me control over your show going forward, but you dialed it back, and I respect that. So just co-host. It's an equal thing now. Thank you.
You've given me the reins to your show, and I would never trust you with the reins to this show.
I'm not qualified, I don't think, for most of your segments. So why is that women's intuition on your part to not hand it over?
Yes, the women's wiles. No, it's mostly because you also need to be a human and, play board games or whatever you do.
I knew this was going to go
free
derogatory. I could tell you were winding up.
You can't pose in front. You can't have like a bunch of like goblins and like weird, wannabe Jedis in the back of your picture and have me not make fun of you.
My first instinct is to say that neither of those things are accurate, but then I might have to explain what they actually are, and I'm worried that's worse. So I'll take the goblins and fake Jedi, I guess.
It always, when a nerd corrects you, you hear the nerd coming out of your mouth. You're always like, it's a little, no, it's all good. It's all good. Nerds have had a renaissance, and you're part of that wave, John. Nerds are hot now.
Trying to be. Well, yeah. I gave up on that, but I do want a renaissance, though.
John, what are you bitching about this fine July Sunday?
I'm bitching about not the same thing I always do when I come on. Usually it's the grifters. Now it's going to be the grifters' marks to some extent. Weak ass men. I was just tweeting about this, actually. Weak ass people generally, but like, you can't hope to correct everyone. And I'm a man, so like the fact that they're so weak, it bothers me more personally.
I'm like smiling with joy for people just listening, because hearing a man call out weak ass men makes me want to be like, yay.
It's like, I often say, like, if you were a cop, wouldn't it bother you even more that all these cops make all of you look so bad? And yet it doesn't really seem to bother them. I'm a man, so I don't want to look bad. Stop making us look so terrible. But no, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of this topic when we talk about, the Musk later on. So I'll avoid talking about that now. But it turns out there are weak men in a lot of different areas. So look, obviously, all of the men who, they only want to know what a woman actually is, and they're very angry about the trans community, and all of the problems in their life are caused by drag queens that live 2,000 miles away from them. That's more than enough material to talk about weak-ass men. But there was actually one specific thing that I woke up to. My wife showed me this. One of my favorite actresses is Florence Pugh. She recently went to this Versace event or something, and she wore an incredibly sheer gown that, like, basically, so she was topless, effectively. And she posted photos of it. Okay. And
so you woke up, you had a good day so far. This is a good day.
Well, this sounds like the premise of a good day, but unfortunately, then men arrived. And so what do you think men did when she posted these photos on Instagram? They were awful, just awful. And look, she's awesome, so she responded awesome way. She had this really detailed response to men who, like, their entire life grinds to a halt when boobs aren't exactly what they wanted to be, or they appeared somewhere they might not have wanted them to, or I don't know, whatever. They're broken. It's impossible for me to put myself entirely into their headspace, but they had a big, big problem with it, and with everything. She's a woman, so they're going to have an issue with literally everything that she does. And I'm just, the idea that you would be browsing a social media site and see a photo and feel like commenting to them about their breasts, like, I find that as incomprehensible as me personally dropping a nuclear bomb on a city. How could your life have come to this place? How could you be this person? Get a goddamn hobby. I can suggest some, as you might imagine. I don't get what is so wrong with so many people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as a woman, whenever like someone posts like a fly photo of themselves, I just do like fire emoji, like heart eyes, and like, wow, amazing. Like, that's all you do. Like, go girl. Like, you kind of just, that's what I've been trained to do. Usually my face is just like nothingness as well. I'm like, yes, girl, you slay queen, But I will say the amount of, and I'm sure the comments are something like, I didn't think you were this person, or I thought you were this person, and then I think of this, or I imagined your boobs different. Like, who knows? But I think that the amount of, and I get a small sliver of this, even from people I've met sort of parasocially through the internet, of like men who feel like you owe them something. And it happens really with women online. It doesn't happen as much, I think, with dudes online, you tell me if people are like, I thought you were this, but now you're that. And I'm not like personally hurt by that.
Sometimes about political stuff. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like a particular thing that you said, and that undercuts, 6 years of your commentary. So that can happen.
Yeah.
It's not as shallow as like your nipple. Like, it's not like that necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
You want young women to look up to you?
Exactly.
Backwards Oakleys. My wife is Asian. Like there's just a type. Yeah. Well, welcome to our world a little bit. Thank you, John. You have earned your ally badge for the week.
Thank you.
It's like the new Boy Scouts. We're remaking them. Boys to Men Scouts, we call it. And you get a little badge every time you call out toxic men.
There should definitely be a reverse of that you give to the toxic men. They were men, they become boys.
They don't
keep a
get
watch out,
badges.
see if they can go back. Yeah, the whole thing just bothers me.
All right, well, let's get into a few things that happened this week. Just a little roundup from my brain. Joe Rogan says he won't have Trump on his program because he doesn't want to help him. And I totally get that. Like, it's so pointless when, like, Rogan's already doing MAGA work on the down low. Like, what's the point? And he's got to maintain some mystery. Like, Rogan having Trump on is as pointless as Pete Davidson leaking a dick pic. We all know. We're aware. We get it. You don't need to rub our faces in it. Or maybe you do. Sorry. Okay. Facing the possibility of 2 years in jail, Trump advisor Steve Bannon now says he's willing to testify in front of the January 6th House committee, but he wants to do so at the public hearing, which means we need a live drinking game, one shot for every time he says the word globalist, and another whenever one of his liver spots answers a question for him. Because that definitely will happen. Former Trump counsel Pat Cipollone testified for 8 hours on Friday to the House Select Committee on January 6th, and I'm excited for at least 2 of those hours to be pleading the fifth and 3 of them to be just sobbing. California Governor Gavin Newsom has announced the state will begin producing its own insulin in order to cut costs out and kind of ice out big pharma. So take that, the rest of America. California has got insulin. What do you got except water? Turns out pharmacies and big pharma companies in the U.S. are throwing away tens of thousands of COVID vaccine doses, even as a second booster has yet to be approved for all people. And I have to say, America's happy place is truly like wasting something in order not to share it. Like, people are always like, oh, America's like the world's leader, or America's the world's police officer. Like, no. We're the world's shitty older brother. Like, we will throw a candy bar out of the window before we give our sibling a bite. Like, that's what we are. Former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, was assassinated by a man who made his own musket. That's right. Gun violence is incredibly rare in Japan because guns are hard to attain, which again is why this man made his own musket. You could see it. It was like wrapped in duct tape and such. And let me just ask, how many mass shootings would America have if all of our psychopaths actually had to put in any work? Just beyond entering their credit card number online, and finally, like, just Japanese construction is better. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, it's even. Sorry. And finally, it's not funny, but there was yet another mass shooting this week. There's been 300 now or more since 2022 began. Of course, I'm talking about the one in Highland Park, Illinois, at a parade for the 4th of July, our Independence Day. A lot of people have been saying nothing could be more American, but I disagree. I think it could be more American if we put all the mass shooters into some kind of game show, and it's sponsored by the gun lobby, and it's hosted by Howie Mandel, and the winner gets mental health care, and their victims get their hospital bills forgiven. We'll call it Who Wants to Be Sad? For everything else, this is the week where. So this was the week where President Biden took little baby Biden steps to protect a woman's right to choose in the wake of the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, something many have been waiting for. So we're gonna get into everything, but he on Friday issued an executive order to protect the right to an abortion, although order is like a real strong term for what it was. Biden doesn't order anything unless it's like an extra side of raisins with his oatmeal. Um, is more of like a wish list or like a resolutions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's look at some of them. They say that they would like to HHS, Department of Health and Human Services, will like to expand access to abortion care through medication. But that's kind of all it says. It's pretty vague. So here was an op-ed in the Guardian, which explains that the order calls for expanded access to abortion medication in states where abortion has not been outlawed, but it doesn't say whether this will include eliminating the current medically unnecessary restrictions on the drugs or making them available over the counter, as abortion rights advocates have called for. It asks for HHS to make updates to current guidelines for emergency medical care in an effort to reduce deaths in pregnant women whose doctors refuse to intervene in medical crises for fear of harming a fetus and incurring liability. It does not call for HHS to solidify these guidelines into a rule that would more forcefully protect women's lives. So it's like, I mean, we want to strengthen it. Well, we affirm the right to get the Plan C pill.
Yeah.
But there's
It's
no efforts to actually, like, what about like manufacturing it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. What about, well, or to go a little bit broader, what about doing something? Anything, anywhere. Yeah, it's you know how like they have executive orders and executive actions. I bet at one point he said, "Hey, I'm going to put out an executive action," and they looked at it and they were like, "Well, it's not even in the same neighborhood as action, so you really can't do that. It's got to be the order." But it's not even that. It's not a wish list, because that implies that he really wishes that any of this gets done, and he doesn't really seem to care. I see no evidence that he cares strongly about it. The only thing he wishes is that people would get off his back, and that's not explicitly written in the document. And according to the SCOTUS, that means it doesn't count. It's not a resolution because that implies resolve. And the only thing he seems resolved to do is die eventually without having accomplished much as president. Yeah, no, this is almost the same exact thing as like me writing an op-ed about what I would like to be done. It's as attached to actual action as that.
Yeah.
It's Biden saying a whole bunch of people in groups, the FTC, the DOJ, Xavier Becerra, Health and Human Services, go do something. Go do whatever. I mean, don't do anything. Spend 30 days looking into stuff, come back to me, and then what? And then we'll be on the precipice of the midterms, and they'll use that as an excuse to not do anything. They won't be able to do anything after the midterms the way this is going. And so, yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing.
Yeah.
It got him a little bit of good press, and then people started to look into it, and I can't imagine anyone comes out the other end excited.
Well, exactly. And depending on who you ask, it's like a bold, important step. And then others are like, nah, there's not really anything going on in it. So the other thing they say is, okay, we're going to convene private pro bono attorneys and basically create some sort of like entity to defend women and people seeking abortions and try to defend that right, and this will apparently include protecting the right to travel out of state to seek reproductive care, which again in my book is just such a bare minimum to protect the right to travel. Like, it's also like who's got access to travel, the days off, the money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, where's the grant money, or where's the federal funding for that? Where's the mobilization of people who might want to donate?
Mm-hmm.
And again, back to the Guardian, they sort of say that, look, there's all these people who are doing this. So it doesn't say where the administration will work to support the attorneys already doing the work that they're saying they're doing, like the Texas-based Jane's Due Process or the legal nonprofit If, When, How. It does not say how it will make sure that this supply of volunteer pro bono legal assistance doesn't dry up. Just kind of like, we want to protect these folks, task force style, which again, I do think is better than nothing. It's better than what was happening up until Friday, which was effectively nothing. And the last thing, they're going to try to prioritize patient privacy, including taking new steps to prevent the transfer and sale of sensitive health data and blocking digital surveillance related to reproductive health services. This will apparently include enlisting the FTC to protect the privacy of people seeking information on abortion services. Yeah. So there's the let's look into helping people, but not we are doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even the FTC thing is the FTC is supposed to look into what steps it can take to protect that data. It's not we've done this. This is codified. This is law. It's hey FTC, come back in a couple months and tell me what you've got. And even that legal defense fund sort of that they're doing. You're totally right to point out, as The Guardian was, like, there's all these issues with whether it would continue long term and all that. But even if we assume that they do it well and that it continues, think about the point that we've gotten to. The Democrats were supposed to protect people's rights. And instead, when all of these things that used to be your rights are now criminalized, you'll have legal representation during it.
Yes.
When, if they follow the train of thought of Clarence Thomas and, interracial marriages are broken up, don't worry. You'll have a lawyer to walk you through the process as your marriage is broken up. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. We are miles away from where The Last Stand was supposed to take place at that point.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of retreating and sort of defending, the innermost realm, which is like the saddest realm, is like we're just ceding all this territory. And it feels like they're not speaking to folks who've been doing this work for so long, who saw this coming. And that clearly, if it took them 2 weeks to come out with executive orders that are this mealy-mouthed, they didn't have this waiting in the wings. They could have had this. It took nothing for them to have this ready. Why not as soon as, the decision leaked back in April? And yet they didn't have that. So it just boggles the mind that it took them so long. And then apparently the day of the decision, of the Dobbs decision, they did convene a meeting with a few, abortion rights activist leaders, organizations around the country. And they said it was like a half an hour call. No questions were taken. It was just affirming that the president cares about the issue. And that was it. And let me just explain. There are gradations of abortion rights organizing. I think we've had on, obviously, Liz Winstead. We had Lori Bertram Roberts on, who works with Mississippi abortion funds. And I would consider them to be more like badass, radical, kind of like, whatever, lefties. But a lot of abortion organizations and reproductive rights organizations are Planned Parenthood and NARAL and folks who are like kind of middle of the road, like kind of don't stick their necks out that much. I mean, they do good work, but they're, again, Planned Parenthood is shutting down systematically like their abortion services, but they are not by any means the ones who've been like they're not the holier than thou, like ultra lefty, blah, blah, blah. No, they're like super middle of the road and they're pissed off. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. When those folks are pissed off, when like the Women's March circa 2022, no disrespect, but like they're a shell of what they used to be. When they're calling out Biden's inaction now after this executive order, that shit is bad. It's bad.
Francesca, Deborah Messing's mad.
Yeah.
How much did you not even live up to ridiculously low expectations if Deborah Messing believes that you haven't really been doing enough?
She paved the way 20 years ago, right? With Will and Grace, or however long it was. She was like, God damn it, I didn't do this show to have you roll back.
Yeah.
LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights. And so, okay, so tracking what's been happening just over the last few days, you have this executive order. There was still massive protests on July 9th, which was already a day of action for abortion rights. There were about 1,000 people outside of the White House. And let's go to some video of that. Okay, so that's outside the White House. Whose house? Our house. Again, peaceful, fired up, etc. Turns out, I guess the White House didn't like that, didn't like the fact that people didn't like their own executive order, and on Saturday put out just a banger of a statement to respond to some of the criticism they've gotten. So this is from Kate Bedingfield, communications director of the White House, saying the president has been showing his deep outrage as an American and executing his bold plan, which is the product of months of hard work. Is it? Ever since the decision was handed down. Then the kicker. Joe Biden's goal in responding to Dobbs is not to satisfy some activists who have been consistently out of step with the mainstream of the Democratic Party. It's to help women who are in danger and assemble a broad-based coalition to defend a woman's right to choose now, just as he assembled a coalition to win during the 2020 campaign. Of which the groups who are now criticizing him, who he calls activists or like fringe activists, were fucking on board for. There were a lot of people, especially in the reproductive rights sphere, who sided with Biden over Bernie for a strategic reason. Potentially safer bet, potentially someone who at least wouldn't give up, again, a crown jewel of the Democratic Party, which is reproductive rights.
Yep.
John?
Yeah. Look, it's like we say, the Democrats, if you watch them, 9 days out of 10, you'd come away believing, man, they have no fight in them. But then on that 10th day, you're reminded, oh, they can fight, but only against the left. They will attack. Right. Or it's not even the left in this case. They are the people that were criticizing them. Sure, they were the left, but many Biden supporters, quote unquote, moderates and centrists, I don't think those terms really mean anything, but people self-identify. Those are the people that are being criticized there. They're pretending in the White House that these people are out of step. No, we know exactly what the polls say. We know exactly what people want. They're just not doing that. Mm-hmm. And I was also told during the primaries that Bernie, too divisive. He's always dividing people. Biden is the unifier. Why are you attacking your own side on an issue that supposedly you agree with us on? This is Biden and his team being incredibly divisive during a time where people are rightfully horrified at the lack of action coming from the Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cynical to say they're out of step with the Democratic Party. I'm sorry, who's out of step with whom here? If the Democratic Party's leader, like Nancy Pelosi, is campaigning for an anti-choice representative like Cuellar in Texas, fuck you. You guys are the ones who are out of step with the masses of your voters, the people who handed you the keys to the castle, who fought for you, who flipped Georgia for you. Honestly, I mean, and I do think that there's a lot of cracks. If there weren't before, if there haven't been cracks that we've seen in the armor of the Democratic Party that really doesn't exist, it's just kind of like a light little tablecloth, I feel like even people now, I feel like folks who are more comfortable now are starting to see like what is truly at stake, and how much also the fight for reproductive rights is about the fight for healthcare and is about a fight for for working class people. There's a difference between people who can afford to have 5 kids, 7 Romney amounts of kids, and people who can't. You know what I mean? Like, it's a class thing. To say nothing of people who don't want to be parents at all. And so it's just insane to me that they continue down this road and they continue to finger wag. And I like to check in with David Axelrod, and he was quoted in this article. And I thought it was an interesting assessment. Kind of just feels, again, just a fucking bitter ass Beltway pundit or Beltway advisor. And he writes about Biden. He's quoted, one of the reasons he was elected is that he's decent, temperate person. And there's no doubt that he can raise his voice. I think there is doubt that he can raise his voice, but just physically.
Well, he might do it, but then he might pass out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it doesn't come naturally to him, and it doesn't land well, said David Axelrod, a former senior advisor to Obama. People got the president they voted for. You're damn fucking right. And I think those are good qualities that he has, but they may not be the qualities that some people, particularly activist Democrats, are looking for right now.
That's
first of all, It's bullshit. It's utter bullshit. Because why? Because John and I are both reading the news, and we've seen that this entire week, the last 2 weeks, have been nothing but inside Democratic Beltway people saying, I don't think he's up for the job. It's not activists. It's their fucking inner circle.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe he made this claim during the primary and I missed it. Maybe he made a speech where he said, if they strip away Roe v. Wade, I'm going to do literally nothing for weeks. And then we're going to put together a commission and probably do nothing. I'm going to do nothing. That's not what he said. And by the way, David Axelrod knows as well as Biden and his team know that he pretended throughout the primary to be far more progressive than he's ever been throughout his career, and that he ever had any intention of being as president. The fact that he's not doing anything in the wake of the destruction of Roe v. Wade is the worst example of this impulse. But you can look at almost any issue. He made promises about student loan debt. He's just not doing it. He implied he would be someone that we as progressives knew there was basically no chance he would be. And as president, he's doing effectively nothing. Mm-hmm. So saying like, oh, you shouldn't be mad at him or mean to him because he's just being who he always said he was, that's not at all accurate. David Axelrod knows that.
No, yeah. And also, and this is sort of where I have to like hit back against, for me, I feel like we have to defend against centrists and this kind of like disgusting, cynical complacency, but then also some of the like inaction from the left, and also the I told you so finger wagging of like, that's why you shouldn't vote for Biden. And it's like, no one's saying that actually. You know, it said a lot for me that Biden had to bend over backwards to bring in the Bernie vote, had to get Bernie on, that Bernie was in multiple calls. Bernie campaigned for him, saying he wants to be the most progressive president since FDR, which is basically Bernie's line. Like, it meant that we do have real power. And again, I do see voting as a defensive mechanism against our worst impulses, which is fascism. Problem is, it's very true. We've bought ourselves some time. We haven't escaped the fascism. And we certainly won't with this kind of status quo stuff. And so I definitely I also really hate when people are like, I knew he wasn't gonna, and I'm so glad I didn't vote. And it's like, good for you for fucking taking a back seat when we have like front row tickets to like the end of democracy. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. We voted Ashmaniel on Twitch saying we voted for Biden. We didn't vote for Biden. We voted against Trump. Absolutely. And I don't think there's any shame in saying that. Anywho, John, I have to get you on to actually talk about what we think about 2024.
I have thoughts.
So there's so much. Next time we'll talk about 2024. But let's pivot. Let's move on to, hopping across the Atlantic, because this was the week where Boris Johnson, the Tory Brexiteering prime minister with backwards Donald Trump hair, resigned in shame after nearly 60 cabinet members also resigned, essentially forcing his hand. Now, the two incidents that really did this were Partygate, which was when he had a party during lockdown in November of 2020, at 10 Downing Street, which we're kind of like in this country, we're like, yeah, everyone, like Gavin Newsom went to fucking like French Laundry. Everybody had a party.
I think he went to Sandals, Jamaica, actually. Yeah. Everybody was having parties. Everybody was eating ice cream. Like, they were all doing it.
Everyone was having a party. But anyway, so it was that. But then specifically one of his cabinet members who he actually gave a raise to was a known sexual predator. So a little bit more on, do we have? I forgot to send these. Anyway, it's okay. It's okay. So those are the two main things. Now, they don't seem like that damning of things, but then again, I'm not going to defend Boris Johnson. And when 60 members of your fucking cabinet resign, you should probably fucking resign. What is fun about this is to see how some in the American media reacted to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will play this Fox News clip, but it wasn't just Fox. You even hear the ways that, like, an NPR, like a New York Times, everyone's sort of like addressing this as so level-headed, like, well, of course he would resign. And yes, and that's the honorable thing, it's as if we have like no understanding that if it happened in this country, and it has happened a million times over under the Trump administration, in no world, not only does he resign, but sure as shit 60 cabinet members don't resign. Yeah. Anyway, take a look at Fox and Friends breaking it down with absolute zero self-awareness of what this means.
He would say one thing and would do something else, and then would pop up in the tabloids. And then with this thing, it's a question of integrity. He has refused to go, even though people have been calling for him to hit the pavement for a while, because he would say, look, I had a mandate. I had an additional 14 million votes from voters who voted for me in 2019, so I'm going to stick around. And he stuck around until he saw the writing on the wall. 53 government officials called it quits. Apparently, his assistants were trying to fill the positions as quickly as people would quit, but they couldn't. And they were people who were in charge of security, the courts, technology, education, finance, Northern Ireland, and science. So clearly, that's a lot of the government with nobody running it, and so now he's going to leave, and without a doubt,
his problems really started with COVID. So he wasn't clear how he was going to handle COVID. Then he got COVID. He really went in the direction of the globalist, lockdown, very serious, very stringent response, and then he was caught, of course, partying it up in what is now known as Partygate.
The globalist response. Just say...
You can just sneak that in there now. You can just say it now.
Just say Chinese. I'm sorry, but just say the China response. The China flu, the China response.
Do we think that's what... I assume they just mean Jewish. That's my assumption. That it's almost we're in the position where like best case scenario they mean China. I think.
Right. Unless they think the Jews did COVID.
Yeah, I think that they think it was something. I'm like kind of joking, but not really. That they think, look, this is an international thing where, sure, the Chinese inflicted us on it, or it on us, right. But it is the Jews who are behind the scenes, letting multiple countries and the UN use it to take away all of your, I don't know, the old school Disney you used to like. I don't know what they think they're doing, but they think it's bad. Yeah.
Absolutely, just all from Hollywood. They're in the Hollywood sign. That's where the Jews control everything from, is from the H of Hollywood.
Exactly. And look, it's almost weird. Obviously, this situation, we can take a look at the fact that so many would resign. We've identified particular things that they resigned for that obviously would not happen in the United States. Maybe under Biden, maybe. But the fact that they elevated, a sexual assaulter, a known sexual assaulter, well, the Trump's entire White House was filled with them. Like, obviously, the fact that a party made him step down or whatever, like Trump, like yelled at a crowd saying we shouldn't be testing for COVID. Like, it's just so ridiculous. Now, that does not mean that Boris Johnson and politicians in the UK don't do tons of stuff that also they should resign for. Like, they have higher standards, I guess, for ethics there. That doesn't mean that they have great standards. But yeah, the inability to see how the obvious overlap with Donald Trump, like Fox and Friends, they're not there to exercise critical thought when it comes to Trump. But so many people died, so many people, and it was part of Trump's strategy, the herd immunity thing, and he didn't have to step down over that. It's infuriating.
Well, it's funny because you're waiting for her to be like, oh yeah, his response was maybe inadequate, or he defied his own rules, which, by the way, he had to pay a fucking fine and paid a fine for Partygate, which is incredible, and like literally said the words, I apologize. Which again, I feel like Democrats see this and they're like, that's a man of honor. You use the word apologize, even if he's totally not a guy of honor, but whatever. Like, you paid the fine, except, end of story. But Republicans look at that and they're like, oh, that's your first mistake, is admitting you did anything wrong. Like, they never apologize. And, and during the Me Too, moment and movement and the fact that it continues, it's like Republicans openly flaunted the fact that none of their people ever would apologize, and that's why they're still in office. Yeah. It's like, you got suckered into admitting your disgusting crimes, We just kind of roll with them, and then we, reelect our people. Anyway, but so you think she's going to go in one direction, like he needs to either be consistent, not be a hypocrite, or like a lot of people did die in the UK, but no, she just goes globalist with it. But it's like, it is kind of nice because you're like, at least you said the words like resign for, accountability, no longer faith in him, blah, blah, blah. My question is, when does the Republican Party jump fucking ship on MAGA? Like, and do they ever jump ship? Like, when do they actually think that their party is more worth saving? I mean, this is like when the Democrats like wet dream what they imagined. We're like, oh yeah, when Trump is elected, it's gonna, and people who had a terrible analysis about 2016, like when Trump is elected, it's gonna ruin the Republican Party. Oh my God, they're all gonna jump ship, and they fucking didn't. Mm-hmm. It was Noah's Ark, baby. They took 2 by 2. No one's jumping.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, and a nice comparison to the fact that the 59 ministers who resigned actually seemed to hurt him, and that was part of why he stepped down. What happens when people defect from the Trump administration, either during it or post it, which has happened? Mm-hmm. They tar and feather them. They smear them. They call them rhinos. I guess in this case, they'd be Tinos. I don't know. With British, I don't know. But yeah, they destroy them. Boris Johnson could have gone in that direction, I guess, and just like mocked the wife of his beans and toast minister who stepped down or whatever. Like, they go about it in a very different way. There are people who will, especially after they lost, Stephanie Grisham and others are highly critical. And they were even at the time, Adam Kinzinger, Sure. But there's still this belief that it's rapidly going to spread. Kinzinger, I think today, was saying that within 10 years, no one will admit to having voted for Trump in 10 years. And I almost like the naivety there. I like the ability to still believe that a better future is possible. And I have no doubt that it will change. They're not always going to be in love with Trump, but it can get worse. Like, they moved on from Reagan to, like Newt Gingrich and George W. Bush. And then there was the brief thing with Romney. Maybe that's not worse. I don't know. But then Trump came. And like, whatever is coming after Trump, I'm sure there's something. But do any of us believe that it's good? Nope. That it's better? I believe it's gonna literally be a demon. That's all it's gonna be. Like, and so
you don't know
think
what's in his heart.
Yeah,
inside the demon's heart, he does want to help the working class. We just need a big, strong demon to run this country.
Exactly. Sure, he's a demon, but he understands that Disney's a squad of lesbos. That's what it's gonna be. Like, we're gonna someday look back on Trump and think, well, those were better times. I'm a little bit worried about that.
I just have to play this clip really quickly because I think it is interesting to see. So that was Fox and Friends. Then you get later in the evening, whoever had that incredible tweet about like Fox really like the wheels coming off at night and going like, what is it? Comparing it to a Waffle House. It wasn't a tweet. I think it was maybe a Daily Show bit. Mm-hmm. How it gets real crazy at night. Well, so Laura Ingraham of the Ingraham Angle, which again is a Heil Hitler, she had Nigel Farage, the actual Brexiteer, the actual, bigoted, xenophobic, like POS, who is like super homies with Bannon, right? Like they're like best buds. And here's what he had to say, that Boris Johnson, he left not because, and they're reacting to an MSNBC clip where the MSNBC commentators are saying, is this the end of populism? I take issue with their use of populism. And of course, Farage definitely takes issue with it.
Was Boris Johnson's unpopularity, Nigel, linked to the fact that he was too populist?
No, the opposite. The truth of it is, he adopted Brexit, and I was very pleased when he did, because I'd fought, as you know, a long, quite lonely campaign. But the truth of it is, he got elected as a Conservative, governed as a Liberal, committing the UK to net zero, increasing taxes, increasing the size of the state, becoming an LGBT fanatic. And the reason he's gone is, number one, he betrayed millions of people who trusted him to stand up against globalization. And we found we had this pro-China maniac running the country. And number two, because he proved to be an outright born liar. So the idea that Johnson's demise means the end of populism is nonsense. And I very much hope and believe that whoever replaces him in the Conservative Party will actually be stronger on these views.
More racist. Code, more racist. Double down on one of the worst pieces of policy, one of the worst decisions the UK's made in a real long time, next to like letting Prince Henry do anything. Is that his name? Andrew, letting Prince Andrew go anywhere. Henry's fine. Like it's Andrew and Brexit. And so this is him saying the same thing. The globalist, he at one point in this interview also says China, like beholden to China. This is Nigel Farage saying that Boris Johnson didn't go far enough, and real populism, or populism in his mind, should stick around. And again, populism there in his mind means be more anti-immigrant, be more Islamophobic, and isolate Britain even more.
Yeah.
The mayor of London called Brexit the biggest piece of self-inflicted harm. This was this week. And hopes that the country can reverse course. And it's now been how many years since they voted for Brexit, and no one knows how to basically, like, how do you drive the knife even farther into our economy with this decision?
Yeah, and people said it was gonna be that way. They've been proven to be correct, and why would Nigel Farage ever admit that? The Republicans have had multiple, here in the U.S. have had multiple huge rounds of tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. We've always said what effect that would actually have. We've always been right, but they made money, so they're not going to be honest. So yeah, he's going to lie about that. I love that they throw in the reference to Boris Johnson, apparently, and this was news to me, being an LGBT fanatic. I don't know. There's a lot that differentiates our countries and our cultures, but the fact that the right is still always obsessed with that community there too, we're kind of similar. But no, I'm so sick of hearing the word populism. I don't trust, we were talking about this last night, actually. I don't trust almost anyone with any words. You put a word out into the wild and they absolutely ruin it. But the
words in the wild. That should be a segment. Words in the wild.
Words in the wild. What happens to it? Every word has a certain amount of range of what qualifies that word. But people use populism to refer to like almost the exact inverses of each other. If someone like a Bernie Sanders or something like that can be a populist, but then also they apply it to right wingers who are just like, I got news for them. Republicans being anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant and all of that, that's not new. And those people might not have always called themselves populists. These are just more vitriolic versions of Dick Cheney and all of that. So yeah, I hate the use of that word, because a lot of bad faith actors who refuse to admit what their actual ideology is use it to cloak the old school conservative ideas, conservative economics, with supposedly being tapped into something cultural that is honestly not new in any way that I can see.
I mean, it's a cloak for, honestly, white supremacist thinking, even that also emanates from certain parts of the shit left. Like, it's just this idea that, like, and what's funny about that, and here's the last thing I'll say on populism and the idea that, like, oh, the far right and the far left can just come together, and together we can throw all immigrants and people of color and women and LGBTQ plus people under the bus, and then yay, the working class reigns. Is it, to be honest with you, that's the same shit that centrists were saying post 2016 election. Don't forget it. They were saying, Nancy Pelosi was saying, we need to be less about identity politics. We need to come together. We need to reach out to across the aisle and get out of our bubbles. Remember, everyone was obsessed with their fucking bubbles after 2016. Instead of admitting, no, a good portion of this country is fucking racist, and they were duped by this idiot fake populist. We don't have to reach out to and touch their feelings and their fear. We've got to out-organize them. We have to do better than them. We have to put up better candidates.
Yeah. Well, and the devil's bargain of screw everyone who's not white, male, cis, straight, all that. But if you do that, then you'll get $20 an hour minimum wage and single-payer healthcare. That would be a horrible deal if they fucking meant it, and they don't. The fact that Tucker Carlson is supposed to be a part of this fucking bargain, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
They don't mean it. You will throw all of those people into a wood chipper. You'll take the entire LGBTQ community. You'll feed them through the machine, all that. But Black Americans, brown Americans, everyone. And you know what you'll have at the end of the day? The corporations running everything and the wealthy running everything, and nothing will fundamentally change. That's what you'll get out of that bargain. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we are going to bring in Professor Richard Wolff. And when I say bring in, I mean I'm going to play the pre-recorded interview. Unfortunately, Professor Wolff likes his Sundays, and John and I don't mind sacrificing them. So I'm going to play that for you. John and I will be back, and we're going to talk about 3 very uplifting stories of sticking it to the man this week that I'm super excited to discuss and show you. And then, of course, again, our Elon bonus convo. A lot to get into then. But, John, I will see you in a little bit. Everybody sit tight and get ready for Richard Wolff. And joining me for the Sitch, so thrilled to have him on for the first time. He's a professor emeritus at UMass Amherst, and he's also the founder of Democracy at Work, which everyone needs to check out, democracyatwork.info. He's an economist. He is one of the leading voices on anti-capitalist economist thinking, and we're so happy to have him. Please welcome Professor Richard Wolff.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Glad to be here.
Yes, thank you for taking the time. I have been wanting to have you on because you're one of the few voices that I trust on the economy from a progressive workers' perspective as well. But I just wanted to ask you, we're hearing a lot about the state of the U.S. economy, the coming recession, the sort of the freakouts and the worries. And I wanted to ask you, is that true? Should we be worried about the state of the American economy today? And in your opinion, why?
The short answer is yes. I'd go so far as to copy other folks who used to say things. If you're not really worried, you must not be paying attention. Because if ever that was true, it's true about the economy today. May not be true only about the economy, but if you look at the economy, I mean, let me put it this way. We have taken the majority of the American people over the last 2.5 years, basically 2020, 2021, and the first half of 2022, 2.5 years, we've subjected them to the worst public health disaster in the history of the United States, which we were unprepared for, which we did not handle well. We've lost 1 million people. I like to point out that the People's Republic of China, a country 4 times larger than this one, for every American citizen, there are 4 Chinese citizens. They have 20,000 dead. We have 1 million dead. There's no contest in who managed this better. Especially if you are committed to the sanctity of human life, and I won't go there, but you'll get the message. At the same time, we had the second worst economic crash in our history, second only to the Great Depression of the 1930s. And this is the real remarkable thing. We had these 2 catastrophic problems at the same time, which we've never had before. We've had viruses before. We've had economic crashes. We have never had the 2 of them together. Really a 1-2 punch for the mass of people that would have been decades to just get over. But we don't have decades. In the last 12 months, we've been hit on top of those things by a terrible inflation, currently running at 8.5%, 9% price increase on average per year, with many items that we basically depend on going up much more than all of that.
Right.
And now we are being told by our leaders, President Biden, Federal Reserve Chairman Powell, and others, that we're about to head into rising interest rates and a recession to cope with the inflation, which they couldn't prevent from happening. Well, here's what I want you to get. And if this scares folks, then understand I'm doing this intentionally. You cannot, in my judgment, you cannot put a mass of working class people through a public health disaster, an economic crash, an inflation, and a recession in 2.5 years and not expect all kinds of divisions, bitternesses, hostilities, weird symptoms. You know, we're killing each other every weekend in our cities. We are finding our political institutions going backwards historically at a rate we really never imagined would happen. We have red states and blue states that will not talk to each other, that snatch businesses from one to the other. But I think these are symptoms, to answer your question, that we are in very deep doo-doo in this economy, and we'd be better off if we faced up to it and tried then to come up with a solution, rather than what we seem to have, which I find bizarre, a kind of collective denial that we are practicing. That we're not seeing it, you know? It's like, you know, when your romantic relationships don't work out and you suddenly discover that all your friends had figured that out weeks or months ago, and you're the last one to kind of catch on. That I have that feeling that we are, as a nation, we're just not and I understand who wants to look at stuff like this, but you better look at it because it's going to be more painful if you don't.
Look at him, girl. She's cheating. He's cheating.
Yes.
And Professor Wolff is raising the red flags here. You're not, when it all comes crashing down, don't cry on our shoulder. I get what you're saying. I did want to address this idea because I think a lot of us who aren't economists don't understand the idea of raising the interest rates and what that does and what it's supposed to do, as the Federal Reserve is now doing. How do they see it stopping inflation? And then what does it actually do to working people or to the majority of Americans?
Okay, great question. Let me go backwards and, you know, tell you what it'll do and then what it's supposed to be as a solution. So what raising interest rates will do, this is very practical. Everybody can understand this.
Yep.
It means that if you are ever in a situation of borrowing money, it's going to cost you more to do that once they raise interest rates than it did before.
Sure.
So let me give you an example of what this means. Anyone well, not anyone, but the vast majority of us in America, if we ever get into the position of owning our own home, you know, an apartment or a house, we're going to borrow money to do that. It's such a common thing that it's a kind of borrowing that has its own name. It's mortgage lending or mortgage borrowing. The word mortgage simply means that the purpose of the borrowing is to buy a home, to buy a house. Okay. Most of us don't have the money to buy a house outright. That's why we have to borrow it. And typically, we work out with a lender, which is, again, usually a bank, but doesn't have to be. We work out with a lender, give us the money now to buy the house, and we will pay you back over a 10, 15, 20, or even 30-year period, so much every month. That will cover the repayment of what you're giving us to buy the house, plus the interest over however many years it is.
Sure.
That's how people buy houses. Okay, so the amount per month depends on the price of the house and the interest rate that you have to pay the lender who enables you to buy the house. If the interest rate goes up, the monthly amount you have to pay goes up accordingly.
Right.
And since you're a borrower, that's really what counts for you. Not so much the price of the house, not so much the amount of the loan, but what does it work out to every month for the next 20, 30 years? You know, I may be planning to have a family. I may be planning all kinds of things. I forgot to budget whether this is doable. And so if you raise interest rates, you're going to make the cost of a home higher than it would have been otherwise as you pay your monthly bill. And what does that mean? more and more people are going to be priced out of it. But that's what it always means. If it's more per month, well, my budget between my husband and my wife or whoever's going in on it with you, you can't do it if it's more than X $100 a month or whatever the amount is.
Right.
And so we're going to see the demand for housing fall. That means the people who build houses will not build them as much as they did before. That means they're going to lay off carpenters and all the other kind of workers that make a house. If we don't build a number of new houses, we don't need the amount of new furniture. We don't need all the people who work making the cloth that covers our sofas. And
sure. And it puts pressure on the rental market as well.
Exactly. So
people aren't able to buy.
That's going to be a downer. You know, people don't get it, but your job in some place in, I don't know, Oklahoma will be canceled because the folks in the lenders in New York City are jacking up the interest rates because that's what they have to pay. They're going to raise it, and you don't see the connection, but that's it.
Right.
The second example, the same thing with automobiles.
Right.
Most of us buy cars, you know, with a 4 or 5 year payout plan. And again, the monthly cost of having the vehicle depends in part on the interest rate. They raise the interest rate, your monthly cost for the same, you know, Chevy that you would have bought anyway at the same price now costs more. But what people don't get is we don't stop there. Your credit card at the end of the month, that has in there that amount, you know, however much you used your credit card, then the minimum you pay. Well, the interest rates go up. And you're going to see that each month, and the amount you pay is going to go up. So the holding on to your debt using your credit card, that's going to become more expensive. And if you're a student or you're thinking of going to university, the borrowing costs for student loans are going to. So everywhere, this is going to pinch. This is going to hurt. This is going to kill jobs. It's going to hurt incomes. The people who lose those jobs, the people who have to spend more each month on their credit card will have less money to spend in the restaurant with the pizza and the friends. And all of that ramifies, you know, spreads out. So it's going to hurt. It's a deliberate act of the government of the United States, and it is designed to reduce spending.
Right.
Okay.
Get less dollars in circulation. Right.
Right. And why? Here's the logic. The idea is if people buy less, it is going to scare the businessmen and women. The people who sell to us are going to figure out we don't have the money we did before. We're paying off our credit card. We're paying off our mortgage. We're paying off our car. And that's costing more because the interest rates are up. So we just don't have it. And the idea is if the businesses see that we just don't have it, they're going to be less likely to raise prices than they otherwise would have, because if we don't have it to start with and you jack up the price to us of what you sell, well, then you can be pretty damn sure we're going to buy less of it, and you're going to be stuck with a high price, but for something you can't sell, and that puts you in difficulty. So
it's very roundabout. I mean, it's like a Rube Goldberg machine of trying to, instead of cutting it off at the source, and I know you've got a lot of good ideas and have written and spoken about them in terms of other ways other than raising interest rates, but it's like getting the business class, cajoling them through raising interest rates. But a lot of things have to happen. People have to get kicked out of their homes. People have to, not be able to put food on the table. There are so many negative impacts on the majority of Americans that have to happen for then prices to come down.
Right. I wish people understood it as well as you just said it. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal your very words. It is making the mass of people who bear no responsibility for the inflation pay the cost of fixing it. I mean, it would be as if you had a really nasty neighbor and they came over to your house and they told you, our toilet doesn't work. We called the plumber. The plumber came over. It's $500. And I think it's appropriate. You're my neighbor. You pay half.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd go, what? It's your toilet. It's your house. I have nothing. I've never used your toilet. I got nothing to do with it. What are you talking about? But that's what we're really doing.
Yeah.
Because, and I can explain this.
You're the one who clogged it, in fact.
That's right. It's your, we won't go there, but the details, this is not my problem. This is your problem. And let me tell you why that fits. An inflation, just so people understand and don't get bamboozled, an inflation is simply a time when prices in general are going up. There's nothing mysterious. There's nothing complicated. Not all prices have to go up for there to be an inflation. They don't all have to go up the same amount. It's just a general idea that in general, lots of prices are going up and few are going down, so that in general, it's an increase in prices. That's all the word inflation means. All right, now let's do the simplest analysis. Who sets prices in our society? The answer is the employer. If you've ever worked in a factory or an office or a store, and most of us have, if we're not already doing it now, you will notice that you never participated in the following meeting. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today our task is to put a price on the shoes we make in this factory, or the software programs we develop here, or that's not your job. The employer sets the prices. The employees do the work, produce the object, the good or the service. But setting the price is the specific, exclusive right and responsibility of the employer. So to answer the question, who raises prices when there's an inflation, therefore, who's responsible right up front, the answer is it's the 1% of us who are employers. The rest of us, the 99%, are the people who have to pay the higher prices, but we don't get to set the prices we have to pay.
Yeah.
I'll put aside the grotesquely undemocratic way this is being handled in our capitalist system. But let's be honest, an inflation wouldn't happen unless 1% of us, the employers, got together and decided to jack up the prices. That's what's happening. So the next question becomes, why are they doing that?
Right.
And here, let's be real honest. I know the answer, because the answer to that question is the same answer you get if you ask a businessman or woman why they do anything. The answer is, I'm in it to make money.
I want a third vacation home.
That's right. Look, I love my work and all of that, sure. But I'm a business. I have to make money. Otherwise, I can't stay in it. So to make a long story short, profit is the so-called bottom line. I'm in it to make money. If you want to know why I bought that truck, or I expanded that office, or I bought that machine, the answer is it's profitable. If it wouldn't be profitable, I wouldn't have done it.
Sure.
So the answer, why am I raising prices, is the same answer they give to every question. Because it's profitable.
Yeah, and because they can. I did want to just get to you, because you have concrete ideas that have been, born out in American history. You talk about the rationing during World War II, how critical that was. You also talk about what's called a wage price freeze that happened under Nixon. Can you talk about either of those examples as ways to, not leave everything up to the bosses, the employers, the heads of industry?
Yeah, let me explain it, because this is a kind of peculiar amnesia that Americans seem to have. It's about their own history. I'll start with a conservative Republican president, Richard Nixon. It's August 15th, 1971. He gets on radio and TV. We have a bad inflation at that time, as we have had periodically in American history, and they have had in every other capitalist economic system as well. It's not a new phenomena.
No.
So he gets on radio and TV, our conservative Republican president, and he says to the American people, we got a terrible inflation. I'm going to take a step now to deal with it. He says, here's how it works. As of tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, any business in America, any, that raises the price of anything it produces and sells, here's what's going to happen. You're going to be arrested and you're going to go to jail because it's illegal to do that. Then he followed. He said, if you're a union or a worker and you make any effort to raise your wages, the same will happen to you. In other words, I'm declaring a price wage freeze. We're going to stop the inflation on a dime right now, right here, and then we'll work out how to rearrange the economy. So he did not require the mass of people to suffer. He did not, none of it. He just said, and guess what?
How long was that in place? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. It was originally set up to last for 90 days.
Oh, wow.
Think of it as a 3-month kind of cooling off period.
Right.
But it was so successful that it actually lasted longer, more like 9 months, because it was working. The inflation stopped. Now, look, people will argue there were problems with that policy. That's correct. There were. But there are problems with any policy. We just discussed, you and I, all the problems from raising interest rates, not as though that's some sort of magic bullet that doesn't hurt anybody.
Right.
The point is we ought to have in America, and I defy anyone to justify what we have in America now. We ought to be having a debate. What about wage price freezes? How did it work with President Nixon? He's, after all, a conservative Republican. That's why I picked him. Look, and we don't. It's as if nobody remembers. And please, everyone, go Google it. Do a little history. Bear me out. Study. I didn't make any of this up. Here's a second example. And I pick it for the World War II because you had a progressive Democrat as president then. So I just want to show you that
you have a guy who says, he wants to follow in the footsteps of FDR, in theory.
That's right. So what did FDR do? It's early 1942. We're really getting into World War II. We're fighting against the Germans and Italians in Europe and against the Japanese in Asia. Okay. The advisors, some of whom were my teachers of economics, so I know the story intimately. I was too young then, but my teachers were young people, and they
didn't let you forget it.
That's right. They love to tell the story. They meet with FDR and they explain to him, because he asks, they explain to him, we are now needing to use lots of resources in America for the war. We have to make guns and bullets and planes and ships and uniforms and all of that stuff that fights wars, which means those resources are not going to be available to produce consumer goods. The railroad that might have brought the wheat to make the bread is now carrying munitions to fight a war.
Right.
So, Mr. Roosevelt, dear Mr. President, here's what's going to happen. We're going to see a sudden drop-off in the supply of goods, consumer goods, because the resources are going elsewhere. If we don't do anything, here's what's going to happen, because this is how the market works. The market, that institution we're supposed to love, but which we should be deeply suspicious of. The way the market works is if there's a sudden drop in supply, the people who want the stuff are going to compete with one another to get it. If there's not enough ice cream cones and you're taking your kid to the park, then you might say, I wanted enough for my kid that instead of the $2 price, I'll offer $4. And the woman across the highway there, she'll offer $6. And then my friend will offer $8. And you know what happens? As the price goes up, middle and lower income people drop away because they can't afford $10 for an ice cream cone. And so they will have to explain to their tearful child while other kids get the ice cream cone, but you don't. And they said to Mr. Roosevelt, if you allow this, you're going to set this country against itself. You're going to have a country torn apart, and that's the last thing you want in a world war. You're worried about surviving, so you can't do it. So what did the president and his advisors do, which Republicans and Democrats endorsed and voted for? No more market. He abolished the market. Right. He said, for all of the things that are really crucial to people's lives, we're not going to let money and all that stops. We're going to publish ration books, which the U.S. government did. Inside of them, they had little stamps that you could tear out, sort of like postage stamps. Mm-hmm. And if you went to the store, the way you bought a quart of milk, a pound of coffee, a gallon of gas for your car, whatever, there was a whole bunch of these things. The only way you could pay for it was with one of these stamps. You had to have a ration stamp, and the government distributed them according to people's needs. So, for example, if you had a lot of young children in your family, in your household, you got a lot of stamps because the understanding was you need milk.
And you couldn't pay for milk in other ways. Like it was
That's
strictly
right.
through those ration stamps.
That's right.
And then,
if any storekeeper sold you milk, like for money in the normal way, they'd be arrested. They would be violating the law. The same as under Nixon, if they raised the price of the quart of milk, they'd be in trouble with the law. And guess what? Most Americans agreed with it. You know, a story used to be told. With a ration ticket, you made sure that the following didn't happen. If you allowed the market to work and the price of milk went up, rich people would be coming in, buying the milk and giving it to their cats at home because they love pets and they like their cats. Whereas the people who had children at home couldn't afford the milk to sustain growing bodies that need the calcium and all the rest. And those kinds of stories made it very clear that the people of America understood that to fight the war, the only fair way to do this would be to handle shortages by a fair distribution of according to the needs people really have, not a market distribution which gives whatever is scarce to the people with the most money.
Was that subsidized then, with the government subsidizing, the milk industry or the gas and et cetera? Like, how did they cajole businesses to go along with that?
Well, basically, they said, this is your obligation. We're fighting a war.
You got to.
The president, by the way, he said this kind of thing. Was an unusual man, especially given the behavior of the clowns that we collect in this country now. So he would go on. He went on and said, look, if I'm asking the young men and women of this country to risk their lives in wars thousands of miles away, I don't want to hear from a businessman that it's going to pinch your profits to accommodate. You can sing that song all you want. You're not going to get any sympathy here. And the mass of people stood up and applauded hearing that kind of talk. No. The business community didn't like it. Mm-hmm. No. They didn't like it. But they didn't dare do anything about it publicly. Privately, they did their thing. But publicly, oh no, you weren't going to hear anything about that.
And now the business just sends Americans to war directly and cuts the government out completely. We fight wars for oil, and it is
even worse. Last week, I don't want to pick on anybody. Although if I'm going to pick on anyone, I'm enjoying going to pick on him. Elon Musk and Jeffrey Bezos. I can't remember. For me, these are the same thing anyway. But one of them sent a tweet to President Biden, addressed a tweet to President Biden, because President Biden had made a speech in which he didn't order, he asked the oil companies not to jack up the price of gasoline. I think it was because of the 4th of July weekend. Don't take advantage. The poor president asking these. Please, really, it's awful. Anyway, he did that. And then the nerve. it's either Bezos or Musk, tweets, "You don't seem to understand economics. You shouldn't be doing that, President. You shouldn't be interfering." In another word, we have to make profit too. Whoa. We're in the middle of an inflation coming after the COVID disaster and a crash. You're really hurting the mass of people. And here you have a billionaire telling the president not to whoa.
Yeah.
And for me, this is as serious a sign of an economy in trouble as anything else. If the people at the top are not willing to make an accommodation, I'm very scared about where that leaves us.
Well, and specifically on gas, I just wanted to get your thoughts. I know, and thank you for breaking this down for us. But I just doing cursory research on this and trying to understand, why has gas risen by 60%? What's going on? The Biden administration's there begging, please, extract more oil. Please, there's billions of dollars of subsidies that we give you, releasing the strategic petroleum reserves. And oil executives are effectively saying, even though there have been meetings, effectively they're like, no, our shareholders, like, we'd prefer to give more money to our shareholders than help the American people out. So no, we're not going to, extract more oil to cheapen the cost. And we like it like this. And to say nothing, let's leave climate change and doom aside, and the fact that we really should be transitioning off of this. It's just so incredible because you've got on the one hand the Biden administration begging for us to be able to dig up and burn more carbon, dig it up. I don't know, they didn't say this yet, but it's only a matter of time before they're like, hey, leases on national lands and open up the Alaskan, National Reserve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got the oil executives like, but we've got it so good right now.
Yeah, let me remind everyone, the richest 10% of the American people own 80 to 85% of all the stocks. Right. So when a company tells you we're doing something for the shareholders, let me translate that into simple economic English. We're doing something for the richest 10% of the people. So if we're keeping the price of oil up there, it's in order to be able to send fat dividend checks to the 10% of the people rich enough to own shares in Chevron or Gulf or Exxon or any of the other oil monsters. That's what this is. This isn't a technical problem. Right. We know where the oil is. We know how to bring it up. I understand all of the climate issues that ought to be in this conversation, but have been neatly pushed out. How nice for the oil companies. So they're able to postpone dealing with the fossil fuel crisis they've created. That's good for them. And they're able to make wild amounts of profit at the same time. No wonder they're celebrating, and they shake their finger and scold the president who even asks them. No more than that. Look, even in Britain, where I was about to say the leader is like our Donald Trump, but that leader disappeared today. He ended his absurd regime. He quit.
Because unlike Trump, he somehow in the UK, they still resign in shame. We haven't, right. We've passed that here.
Right. He resigned. His capacity for shame is a little bit closer to Mr. Trump's. So he resigned. I wouldn't say he did it there wasn't much shame. He referred to his own political party, the Conservative Party in England, as, I quote now, the herd. The word you use for a large group of, animals in a group. They're the herd, and they drove me out. That's not a man who seems to understand that one scandal after another and one bald-faced lie after another might make it a question of whether you belonged in that job. But even in Boris Johnson's regime, they put what's called an excess profits tax on the oil companies, saying if you're going to raise the prices to make a lot of profit, you have to, quote, share that with the people of Britain. So we're going to tax you. In this country, we don't even do that. And it boggles the mind. The new government in France just announced yesterday, because they had an election 2 weeks ago in which the explosive new reality of French and European politics was the enormous popularity of the extreme left in France, which American media do not cover. The sitting president got 38% of the vote for his party. Right. The new far left leftist party, led by a man named Mélenchon, who you might want to talk about, who is a Marxist and says so and has been.
Yes.
They got 32% of the vote. And what we hear about here is the right wing, the Trump-like. In that country, it's a woman named Marine Le Pen. The lefty got 32% of the vote. The right winger, Le Pen, who's been there a long time, she got 17%. The left is twice the strength of the right, but if you ask most Americans, they have no idea.
And also this is a digression, but also whenever like mainstream news covers the French elections, all they do is cover how Marine Le Pen is gaining steam, even if she's losing steam. They love the dawning of fascism because the headlines write themselves. But you've got a leftist in there who's like actually wants to, I don't know, provide for the people, and they're like, nah, that's boring.
By the way, the new government just announced new prime minister, who is a friend of the sitting president Macron. So she's no leftist, but the power of the left is so strong. She just said one of the first acts of the new government is the nationalization of the electric company in France. The government owns already a big chunk of it, but they're going to own all of it. They're taking it over. That's a gesture to the left. That's an attempt to say the government will take over and we will set the price of utility for you in your home, your electricity, your water, your gas, and all of that. In other words, here's the bottom line.
Yes.
Things could be handled radically differently from the way they are. We are handling the inflation, the interest rates, the price of oil and gas in a peculiar set of ways that happen to be very good for the 10% of the people at the top and very bad for the 90% who are supposed to govern in a democracy. And I don't think you can forever hide that from the American people. You're doing a good job, but I don't think, and there's where programs like yours, the kind of work I do, play a role. Yes. Our job is to say, wait a minute, you have not exhausted the range of possibilities. You have not explained this in a way that allows people to see the different ways one can go about it. And you don't even want to admit that in our own country, Republicans and Democrats have, in fact, gone about it differently. You're all pretending none of that ever happened.
Right. And we didn't even really talk about wages, which the Fed chair Powell said are too high. Yeah. And effectively that there are too many vacancies, too much. There's not unemployment, but there's too many job vacancies. And so all this will, interest rates, all that stuff will be good because it'll drive people to accepting some crap job that they probably shouldn't accept anyway. But I just want to say that it feels like Biden wants to have his cake and eat it too, wants to keep the status quo, does not want to even look back in American history to take steps to truly address this in a way that would help most people, not just these shareholders. And I'm thinking of climate change and student debt, which people are eyeing. All eyes are on him before the midterms to do something on. And yet you've got the oil and gas industry and then the Fed chair raising interest rates that are fundamentally going in contrast to any long-term plan of addressing those two crises right now. I guess just final thoughts on what, on that and sort of, unless Biden is willing to make a break from that status quo, do you see this getting better?
I don't see Mr. Biden making a break. He never has. He's been, let's be honest with one another, all of us. He's been a senator from Delaware. Delaware is the state in the United States where most corporations go to file their papers. Corporations have to be registered in a state. The reason they go to Delaware, it has the most corporate-friendly laws anywhere. There's no mystery. And he is the senator from the state that's down on its knees to every big corporation. Please come here. And they have. He's not the man who's going to confront corporations that are ripping people off. He's their man. And he may be less crazy and less scary and less divisive in the moment than Mr. Trump was, so he can get elected. But he is not a man to deal with an economic system like this one to change it. He believes in it. It's the basis of the career he's enjoyed all the way up to the top. This is not the man you look to. That's why in other countries you ask these people, step aside, because you're just not constitutionally able. And here he is, let's remember, looking at a midterm election in November that at this point looks like a blowout, not good for him, good for the people he says he opposes. And as you rightly say, he's not doing any of the dramatic things he could do, he should do, even some of those he might not be able to persevere. The very fact that he would be trying, let the Republicans block him, but he's really trying, would allow him to get the support of what I am clear in my work is a majority of Americans who don't like what's happening, and they shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's a ripoff.
Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you specifically, we always talk about the, elimination of student debt, how critical that would be, even at $10,000, which Biden said he was for. Now it's okay, means tested, whatever. But again, it's not clear if any of that will happen. Will that, in the long term, it will help millions of people free up money to be able to do things like invest or buy a home, et cetera, start a business. But in the short term, are they just worried that that's going to create inflation because you're going to have people with more money? Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's the direct impact on this economy as we have it now?
Let me give you a closing answer that deals with this.
Yes.
And I go back to my best friend here, my Republican president, Richard M. Nixon, back in 71. Here's an example of a program that would solve your difficulty. Forgive the student loans. Give the 42 million Americans who are now stuck with those loans for the terrible decision they made to get more education and thereby become able to contribute more to the society than what they could have contributed without the education. For this terrible crime, they are now in deep debt. Forgive the debt. That means they'll all have money that they used to pay the debt with that they will now go out and buy goods and services. But to avoid the inflation, which you claim is why you don't want to help the students, here we go. Let's have a wage price freeze. Let's have us do what Nixon did. You know why? Because then all the extra money that the students will spend will come to the businesses. They will not be able to raise the price to meet that money. They'll have to order more goods to be produced to sell. In other words, we'll get what we want, the spending, the jobs, the production, but not the inflation. All of that is eminently doable. We've done it. We know how to do it.
Yes.
It's that the people at the top, look, we are a debt-ridden society. Our government is in debt up to here. Our corporations, because we've had zero interest rates or nearly such for 20 years, every corporation in America, whatever its problem, solved it quickest, easiest, and cheapest by going and borrowing lots of money because it was virtually free. So our corporations are in debt. Our government is in debt. Here's the problem. If you help the students because they deserve it, you know what's going to happen? Every desperate homeowner, every desperate car owner, every desperate credit card holder is going to say, hey, what about me? I'm in trouble. I can't do for my family. I need some help. Good that you did that for the students. Now give it to me. At that point, capitalism begins to crumble because it has built itself a house of debt cards and it can't quite navigate. So the answer is the people at the top don't want to start a process they can't handle. So they're not going to give it to the students either. And let me close with this. I'm a professor. I've been dealing with students all my life. I won't bore you with the number of times a young man or a young woman has come into my office. We've had a conversation about a midterm exam or a term paper or whatever it is. And when we're done with that, there's a little personal moment. And the tears start coming down, men and women alike. Why? I can't afford it. My mother just called me and told me my father lost his job. They can't cover for me. I'm already in debt $38,000. I can't borrow more, but I can't give up my education. Then I'll be left with no degree, and the $38,000 is still there. I mean, and they don't know what to do, and their family can't help them anymore. We're putting people through experiences like that left and right. And now I'm going to tell you about another country like ours. It's called Germany. In Germany, they have a different attitude. Here's how it works. In Germany, universities, get ready for this, are free.
Stop.
Free. It's just free. There is no tuition, no fees, nothing. The student has to cover his or her room and board. You have to feed yourself, you have to clothe. That they won't pay you. But you are not required. And not only is that available to every German, here's what you might want to make a note about. It's open to anyone everywhere. There are about 25,000 Americans in Germany getting degrees and paying nothing because they can't afford to go to college in their own country. And you know what the Germans say? We will keep a certain percentage of them. You know, they'll meet a German boy or a German girl and one thing to another and all the rest. They'll stay here and we'll get the benefit.
They'll contribute. Yeah.
Right. And even if they go back home, they'll have a feeling about Germany and all of that.
Right.
That will be a good thing for us. It's a good investment. And we want people to do this. So we're going to pay for it out of taxes on the, and by the way, Germany is one of the 8 countries in Europe now that does this. So it's not unique to Germany. Why in the world is the United States, which boasts being richer than all those countries, unable to do? And the answer is we are shooting ourselves in the foot. In the long run, this is a way for the United States to become less of a player in the world economy because other people, like the Germans, like the Chinese, are going exactly in the opposite direction.
Well, we have no concept of soft power. We have no concept of any power that doesn't involve military might. It's just like, the idea that we would be heralded for education around the world and including our own citizens, that just boggles the mind. If we don't get our way in the world, we'll just, throw a bunch of F-16s over there and drone them. I mean, it's so backwards. Professor Richard Wolff, everyone, democracyatwork.info, check out his work, check out his website, always doing interviews, always putting out articles, direct you to In These Times, his piece about 3 options and alternatives to the current raising of the federal, the interest rates. Yes. I'm like, let's remember what we've learned. Thank you so much for joining me on the Bitchuation Room. You're wonderful as always, and take very good care.
Thank you very much, Francesca. And really, hear me when I say programs like yours that dare to go into this stuff and talk about it, this is a country that needs that more than ever, and we should all be grateful for you doing it.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. That is Professor Richard Wolff giving the Bitchuation Room just so graciously giving us his time and giving us some masterclass on how to actually think about the economy in this critical time. Thank you guys all for being here. We got one more segment. We'll be back with John Iadarola in a minusecond. Minusecond? Yeah. Minusecond. Hey, that's what it was.
It was quick.
It was a minusecond. Oh my God, that I took a lot away from that interview, and I think the one thing I truly like am firm on is that my kid is going to study in Europe. No ifs, ands, or buts, and like
Save a lot of money.
it's so cheap and or free. And I'm an EU citizen thanks to Il mio babbo, my dad, and because I'm Italian and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh no, you go over there to study. It's just as good. I don't want to hear another word, and I can come visit, and it'll be lovely.
Well, and that's you're focusing there on the price, but I mean, God only knows what will be left of universities after 2 terms of Ron DeSantis.
God, oh, it's just gonna be like
dens of communism.
It's gonna be the worst. Like, I'm just imagine when you were in college, the shrillest, stupidest person who would comment, be like, well, I read in Cosmo that like actually slavery wasn't that bad because like straight up, like I had people like bringing in like fucking things they read in a magazine into school, and you're like, I'm sorry, did you do the reading? Yeah, that's what I thought. That will be everything. Like that will be curriculum. It will be like, no, we should read like Quilting Daily or like,
I'd prefer that to 4chan.
Paula Dean's advice on American history, fucking Sarah Palin's listicle of the 20th century. like that is what the future. I'm trying to get there. I think that was good. Sarah Palin's listicle of the 20th century. Okay. A few comments. Kevin Speedroid Dude on Twitch says damage report plus Bitchuation room equals Bitchuation report. That is right. Very good. You did it. And a few people writing in Camperman 5000. Is it inflation or is it record profits for greedy companies? Exactly. Bama Raider 12 on Twitch saying inflation is caused when the wealthy get tax breaks. And Joe 47771 says the monopoly man sets prices. Yeah, he does. That's what we've learned. And I really appreciate the comment over here from wait, I lost it. Where's Lauren? I don't know. Lauren said, Lauren Knight, I'm going back to college for finance. Professor Richard Wolff is a saint doing the good work of providing free information to anyone interested. Love you for this one, Fran. Richard Wolff equals the truth. Amen. Agreed. Anyway, we have one more segment before we go into our bonus episode. There were so many actually like quirky good stories this week, and I wanted to wrap them all up in a new segment that I'm calling Sticking It to the Man. So these are some stories that maybe slipped under the radar because we're all focused on how everything's awful, but there were a few fun little moments that I want to highlight and get your thoughts on, John. We don't have a game. We don't have to vote which one's the best. Well, just like it's a purview. It's a sort of a smorgasbord, a sampling of the good stuff. So this was fun. In Texas, where now having abortion, getting an abortion is illegal or in courts or under discussion. A pregnant woman was given an HOV ticket, arguing that her fetus is a passenger. So HOV is like heavy on, like, what is it? It's a carpool lane, basically, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the acronym means, but it means, that there's more than one person, yeah.
I'm going to say heavy overdrive vehicle. It's like heavy occupancy vehicle. I got there because I'm smart.
Mm-hmm. It's number of people or body weight, yeah.
So she said, this is Brandy Batone, was recently driving down Central Expressway in Dallas when she was stopped by a sheriff's deputy at an HOV checkpoint to see whether there were at least 2 occupants per vehicle as mandated. When the sheriff looked around her car last month, she recounted to the Washington Post that he asked, is it just you or is there someone riding with you? And I said, oh, there's 2 of us. And he said, where? and she was 34 weeks pregnant and pointed to her stomach. Even though she said her, quote, baby girl is in there, Boton said one of the two deputies she encountered told her it had to be 2 bodies outside of the body.
That's kind of deep, actually.
2 bodies outside the body. She still got this ticket for $215, but she says she will be fighting it. She's going to be, and as a pregnant woman right now, fuck yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, what about your kid? Like, you gave birth to them, like, you created their cells, like, even once they're outside, they're still kind of you. No, I love this. It's like a live action Traffic version of what I do on my show. It's like pointing out the ridiculous hypocrisy and losing inevitably. Yes. We never win with this because they don't care about the hypocrisy, but it feels kind of good as the boat slips beneath the waves.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work, but if we all do it, I mean, maybe there's a case to be made. But again, this is sort of like it's the same sort of like, well, why aren't we doing this to men? We should regulate men's bodies. And like, obviously that's not the answer, and we're doing this rhetorically because no one should be regulating anybody else's body. But it is fun, especially when it comes to driving in the carpool lane, to claim that there, yes, are 2 people. So that was one little sticking into the man story. Another one, this one, I mean, come on, wow. Feces mailed to 25 Republican lawmakers in Ohio. Yes, okay, that takes work. Why they were sent to them remains unclear. No policy issues or certain grievances were included in the letters, said Senate GOP spokesperson John Fortney. The return addresses on the letters were deemed fake. Of course, there's a lot of, they were intercepted. They didn't reach these lawmakers, but
damn,
I think
a
we
wasted
can guess.
turd is a sad turd. We should guess what? Why they were sent?
I'm just gonna say I think it was a woman. I want to claim this for our team. And I also want to just commend anyone who manages to shimmy a poo inside of an envelope. Like, how do you do that? Do you like open up the bubbled like padded envelope, like over the toilet, or do you fish out and then put in? That might be another like. Yes,
I think you set up all of your stationery and your envelopes and all of that on the table, and then you squat over it for convenience. This doesn't need to involve the bathroom at all. This is a serious endeavor.
Well, and the question is like, is it over time? Because so that's a lot of 25. Is that 25 days of poo, or did you divide it up? Did you have to use like a Play-Doh cutter to like divide up?
And did you briefly pause and like, how much really is needed to get across the idea? Because I don't want it to be a pathetic amount. I don't want them to think that like I'm not having enough fiber. So it has to be at least half of a log, I think.
Yeah, you got to be mad as hell. I mean, and Ohio again is one of those states that is banning abortions. I mean, that's
probably what this is about, I imagine.
Absolutely. This is where the 10-year-old had to flee in order to go to Indiana for the closing Star Wars, door on the ship of reproductive rights as we slide in. Whatever, John. Don't fucking.
And then we're in the garbage compactor and the walls are closing in, and all we have is poop, so that shall be our sword.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And then finally, my personal favorite. So in Sri Lanka this week, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa whose family's dominated politics in Sri Lanka for 2 decades, has decided to resign after months of protests accusing him of running the island's nation economy into the ground through corruption and mismanagement. And there were a lot of scenes out of Sri Lanka, people storming the presidential palace and specifically jumping into the presidential pool.
That's a nice pool. The little flip.
So great.
Flip for democracy.
Like, you know, hashtag no coup, you know, no January 6th, but like that is some shit I super get down with. And I love how like you feel like we're about to like, you know, like rack focus and push in on like one of the dudes and he's about to start rapping in Sri Lankan and you know, like the music video breaks out. Like it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that going around. I just thought that like the servers for the Swimply app had been overbooked or something. It's like you show up and there's already a family there. No, that's good. Look, I think yes, no violence, nothing like that, but we do need to be willing to be a little bit confrontational. I do think though, like everyone's super impressed with that, but they haven't yet reached the levels of the US where people are like they're waiting outside of a Morton's, and that is some deep confrontational stuff. Horrifying, really.
My God. Outside of it, right? They didn't even get in.
Outside of it. They didn't even see the person they were protesting, and that is a line that I don't think we should even get close to.
It's terrible. No, Brett Kavanaugh absolutely has a fucking pool. We should all go and jump inside of it. Like, this is the one thing that especially when it's summertime, especially when it's hot, I'm like, no. Anyone can go to any pool. Pools,
it's a
like after the
resource.
I'm just saying, after the rev, man, pools are a public resource. We reappropriate them. It's already bad enough to walk by. You guys do this where you like walk by in your neighborhood and you see, or you go to another neighborhood that's really nice and you totally see like an empty, what is clearly a second home, or they're like off on like their summer vacation to the Cape or whatever, and they've got a giant pool there, and you're just like. Ugh. You know where the first place obviously is?
What?
Have you been to the Hearst Castle?
I haven't.
Okay, so the Hearst Castle, it's not that cool. You just tour it, and it's like overlooking the ocean, and it's hot as hell. And like the pools at the Hearst Castle are incredible, but you're not allowed to go in them. That's when the fucking rev happens. We're going to the Hearst Castle. We're jumping into William Randolph Hearst, like amazing fresh spring like pool. It's so nice.
No, that'll be the good thing about the rev is that those final BS laws we won't have to abide. Like you can swim in the Hearst Castle pools and you can pet the drug sniffing German shepherds. I'm a human. I'm a man. I will do what I want. I will pet that good boy.
I love it. All right. So that was Sticking It to the Man this week, you guys. Don't tell you I didn't tell you anything good in the world. John Iadarola of The Damage Report. If you're not watching or listening as a podcast to The Damage Report, you fucking up. Do it. Especially on Mondays. They've got this really amazing co-host, not co-host.
Yeah, it gets a bit gross, but yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I did take that time while we were playing that pre-record to look at Florence Pugh's beauties. And
what'd you think?
She looks great.
Obviously, she can do whatever she wants.
She can do whatever she wants. Good on her. And
can I plug one other thing other than the Damage Report?
Please.
Obviously, the Damage Report, and obviously, do not do anything until you've gone to the Bitchuation Room Patreon. But I too have a Patreon. Woo. And you might think, well, John, you already do so much political stuff. Am I really going to follow more of your political stuff? I'm not asking you to. This is not political. I write fantasy and sci-fi post-apocalyptic fiction, and I release that. And my writing group does a monthly podcast breaking down some movies, and that's all available at patreon.com/John Iadarola.
What's the podcast called?
The podcast is the Peanut Butter Storytime podcast, where we break down stories to have a little bit of fun and learn some stuff that can inform our own writing.
So it's like breaking down stories of fantasy work that you guys like and like sci-fi work that you guys like.
So it can be anything. The first few months we've done movies. We did the original X-Men movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and then we did the Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring last month.
Oh, okay. So this is well-worn territory, but you haven't heard John Iadarola like this, you guys. So
well, and it's not really about the movie. It's about the storytelling, about character and tension and twists and all of that. Like breaking that down so you can learn to tell better stories.
I love it. Oh my God. Yeah. Hell yeah. Everybody check that out. And John, I'll see you in the bonus bish. Everybody get your ass over there because we're going to talk about Elon Musk. And before we go, just wanted to give a shout out and read some super chats. Michael Murray, I don't know if you remember this when I met you in San Jose, which you then corrected to be San Diego. Thank you for paying more to correct yourself. I jokingly introduced you to my partner by saying she's also ethnically ambiguous. You did. I love that. And this is a podcast too. Anna Hosnier and Shreen. Why am I blanking on Shreen's last name? But they run a podcast called Ethnically Ambiguous, and they interview all kinds of folks, and it's great. And you guys should definitely check it out. Thank you so much, Michael Murray. Tanya Sewers, last Sunday's bonus episode was hella funny. I keep rewatching and it was just as funny on repeat. Yes, we talked about Jordan Peterson with Matt Lieb. It was real good. Reiki Dragon, thank you for the super chat. Biden's action equals executive thoughts and prayers. Effectively. Like, that's what it does feel like. KM81677 says, apparently the White House said that this weekend the activists are out of step with Democrats. No, the Democrats are out of step with what the people want. We had a rally in Iowa, estimated 2,000 people or more. That's great. Hell yeah. I love, this is Shade Dragon saying the activist left is why we have OSHA. Activist left in reference to what Biden and the Dems were calling the activist left is why we have OSHA, the Audubon Society, the weekend, school lunches, public schools, the women's vote, and didn't have mass shootings every day for a while. You win the comment section, Shade Dragon. I love you. Darren Skolsvold on YouTube says mortgage is Latin for until death. I like that. Robert, thank you for the super chat. Let us read or become familiar with Pure War by Virilio and Lotringer, which explains and defines the conditions of endocolonization when external colonization and exploitation is no longer possible. Googling endocolonization. And Matt Gates on a Ford Bronco, thank you for your super chat. Mr. Wolf, if these folks were truly pro-life, they do certain stuff, but not getting to it. That's how it's done. Lays the facts, but always kick. Think I understand some of that? I'm feeling a few extra kicks in my tummy today. And Robert Ryder, thank you for the super chat. Fran and John on my birthday. Best birthday ever. Best present ever. Happy birthday. Thank you, J320. Tony Rizzo, high occupancy vehicles. Yes, I eventually got there. Jeff Ray Will Stewart, what a great show. Thanks. And Madrugada Dreamt, let's go Sri Lanka. We motherfucking out here. Hell yeah. And with that, you guys, we'll be back next Sunday with Nato Green. The show is live every Sunday, 5/8 Eastern on Twitch and YouTube. Thank you to Paige Omek, my producer on the other side. Thank you to Alexandra Orness. Thank you to Maximilian Inhofe. And remember, we'll be starting on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern in August. But for now, get your asses over to the bonus show, right? Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. We talking about Musk, people. All right. Fight the power. Fuck the patriarchy. And don't just bitch about it. Be about it. Bye.